Let me introduce you to one of my favourite people. His name was Lucius Annaeus Seneca, and he was born in southern Spain in 4 BC and died in Rome in 65 AD. He lived a fascinating life, and his thoughts and writings have influenced religion, philosophy, and political theory for 2,000 years. So much so, in fact, that here we are on YouTube a long time after his death, discussing his life and thought. I like Seneca because he thought deeply about life and death. He said that the deep flood of time will roll over us. Some few men will raise their head above it, but most are destined to depart into the same realms of silence, into battle against oblivion. What he's saying is that time rolls over us all, and it's unstoppable. And unfortunately, most people's lives disappear into oblivion, forgotten. Seneca wasn't some armchair philosopher either. He lived in a time when intrigue and political maneuverings and court politics meant that you could be killed at any time. The way you thought and lived had a real-time life and death consequence. Knowing how fragile life is and how uncertain tomorrow is, he wrote often about the importance of living well each day, saying, "Judge a life by its weight and not by its duration." And the knowledge of the reality of the shortness of life was acute in Seneca. Caught up in a turbulent and uncertain time in Rome's history, he was involved in the political maneuverings at the very highest levels of political Roman society. His ideas were not always popular, so much so that he was eventually exiled to the island of Crete by Emperor Claudius. During his several years of exile, he thought often about how fickle fate could be, and wrote, "No one has had so much divine favours that they could guarantee for themselves a tomorrow." Now, eventually he was actually recalled out of exile and back to Rome by an ambitious empress who had grand designs for her now infamous son, Emperor Nero. She had decided that Seneca would be her son's tutor and mentor. Now, if you know anything about Roman history, you know that Nero was a famously paranoid and capricious individual, so much so that he actually had his own wife killed and his mother. And one day it was Seneca's turn too. And so Nero sent henchmen to Seneca's home and commanded that Seneca take his own life, which he did. And there we are. There's a whistle-stop tour of Seneca's fascinating life and death. Seneca wrote on the shortness of life in 49 AD, and it was the first book of his that I'd read for myself. And it changed the way that I think and the way that I live. This very short book is actually a letter written to a chap called Paulinus, who is likely to have been a relative of Seneca on his wife's side. And the overall theme of the book is about the tension between two realities. On the one hand, life is short, tomorrow is not guaranteed, and death will creep up on you unawares, and it will take you. But on the other hand, life is long enough to accomplish much, but only if you live deliberately and live well. I feel the tension of these two truths deeply, and I have for as long as I can remember. I think often, perhaps daily, about my death. I know that one day soon I will die. And for a while, those who love me will miss me. But Even for my loved ones, the grief will pass and the pain will fade. And those people that I love will die too. And within a very few years, no one will remember that I lived at all. And I believe that our society, particularly in rich countries, are so far removed from the life-threatening uncertainty that past generations and people all over the world today daily face, that we now have an aversion to thinking deeply about our own death and the fragility of our lives. And thinking about my inevitable death isn't comfortable. I don't enjoy it. But Seneca believed that this is essential to living well and to truly living. By ignoring the fleeting nature of our existence, Seneca believes that we end up wasting what little time we have. He once wrote, "Some have no aims at all for their life's course, but death takes them unawares as they yawn languidly. It is a small part of life that we really live. Indeed, all the rest is not life, but merely time." And as I approached 30, which to be fair is a few years ago now, and I read Seneca for the first time, it began to dawn on me that I'd spent much of my life, most of my 20s, yawning languidly, as Seneca put it. And I slowly became more and more determined not to allow time to pass me by without doing all that I could to truly live. And as I read more of Seneca's tiny book, he goes on to say that although remembering death is the first step to wise living, it isn't the only step. Once you appreciate the shortness and the uncertainty of life, once that penny drops, now you can truly live. He said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if we are well invested." And for me, once this began to dawn that today may be my last, I think a few things started to change in my mind and in my life. And the first is this: my priorities changed and the goals of my life became more clear to me. Some of the things that I'd valued began to lose their value, quite frankly. And the number of goals that I had reduced in size too. I've only got so much time to live, and so the 1,000 things that I would love to do are unrealistic. But the 10 things that I could really do well are entirely possible. Number 2, I vowed to live deliberately. I wrote resolutions for my life, which I still read every day, that keep me focused, that keep me on track, that remind me of the shortness of my life. And I started to fill my mind with the writings of a variety of people who dedicated their lives to thinking about life and how to live well. And then third, I decided to speak to as many people as possible about life and death. If you have a look behind me, you'll see a poster on my wall produced by a great company, I think, called 4K Weeks, which has a square box for every week of my expected lifespan. And each Monday morning, I colour in a new box. And for me, this is a visual and deliberate reminder to me of how much of my life has passed and how the end of my life is inexorably approaching. And I'll be honest with you, remembering that my life is short is sometimes a sad moment of reflection. Monday mornings can be tough sometimes. But, as Seneca promised, more often than not, this is a positive influence on my days and my weeks. Nothing so far has energized and helped me more put life's big questions and daily frustrations into perspective than remembering my death. And as each day passes, I become more and more excited about the potential that life brings. I'm so thankful to Seneca for writing his letter, and although he meant it for Paulinus, not me, and although he wrote it 2,000 years ago, I found so much help and wisdom in it. And you know, it's not too late. If you're my age or older, there is still time now to remember your death and begin to live. And if you're younger than I am, then the gift to you is even more profound and precious. But whoever we are, think of all that we could achieve if we stopped taking tomorrow as a given and began to live deliberately and with purpose. And this is why I started this channel in the first place, to try and reach anyone who would pause and listen to me rattle on about the things that matter to me. Because I believe that our lives are profoundly shaped by our ideas, by our thoughts. I believe that you are what you think. Well, I hope you found this video helpful and not too depressing. And if you believe also that you are what you think, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts, so please write something in the comments section below.